Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Hebrews study. Today we are in Hebrews chapter 7, verses 1 through 10. This is episode number 13 of our series on the book of Hebrews, rooted in God's Word. Let's jump into it today and let's understand what Hebrews chapter 7, verses 1 through 10 says. Now, this is going to be a little bit deeper as we talk about some principles that have been brought up a couple of other times in the book of Hebrews thus far. So let me give you somewhat of a recap of what we have talked about. First, we have had this theme that Jesus is our high priest, and the theme goes back all the way to Hebrews chapter 2, verse 17, where it starts talking about Jesus being our high priest. He started talking in Hebrews chapter 5 about Jesus being along the lines of a guy by the name of Melchizedek. Now, a lot of the Jewish Christians of the day that the Hebrews writer was writing to had a hard time with understanding Jesus as a high priest. And the reason for that is that Jesus did not come from the priestly tribe, which was the tribe of Levi, and he did not come from the priestly family, which was the family of Aaron. So in order to be a high priest, you had to be of the tribe of Levi, and in more particular detail, you had to be of the family of Aaron. And they would trace back those family trees and those generations to make sure that you were such. The writer of Hebrews, though, is referring to Jesus being our high priest. And all of the new Christians would say, well, how is he a high priest? He is not from the tribe of Levi. He is not from the family of Aaron. How can he be a high priest? Well, he brings in this idea and this concept of that Jesus was a different kind of high priest. In fact, he was the kind of high priest that existed before the tribe of Levi and before the family of Aaron. The tribe of Levi would have come about from the guy by the name of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. One of Jacob's 12 sons was named Levi, and that was the tribe of the Levites, and that's where the high priest or the priestly line would have come out of. The person of Aaron would have been at the time of Moses. So this would have been even years later, years removed from Jacob, from Israel. This would have gone back before that. So the person of Melchizedek goes all the way back even before that to Genesis chapter 14. And the idea that the Hebrews writer is talking about is that Jesus is a high priest and a king that is different from the priestly line and the high priestly line that were established years later. He is a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Now, for most of us as Christians today, this really wouldn't make sense, or it wouldn't be one of the things that we would wrestle with, but it was something that was wrestled with in the early Jewish Christians of the day, especially when the writer of Hebrews is talking about Jesus being a better priesthood and a better high priest. So let's look at this starting in chapter 7, verses 1 through 10, and then I'm going to jump to Genesis chapter 14 and try to explain to you this idea of a guy that only appeared in 3 verses in the Bible, and his name was Melchizedek. So let's look at it together. Hebrews chapter 7, verses 1 through 10, it says these words: For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God. So this is the priest that is being talked about. So the Hebrews writer again is saying that Jesus is not of the tribe of Levi. That's where all of the priestly line would have come out of. So the priest would have come out of the tribe of Levi, and the high priest would have come out of the tribe of Levi, but also the family of Aaron. This would have accounted for the high priest. Jesus didn't come out of either of those lines because Jesus is a different high priest and he is a better high priest. He comes out of the line of a guy by the name of Melchizedek. He was known as King of Salem, and he was known as priest of the Most High God. Now, he existed well before this group existed. So he was essentially the first. He was the king of Salem. He was the most high priest, or the priest of the most high God. So let's talk a little bit about what that story is, and let's turn to the book of Genesis, and let's look at chapter 14, verses 18 through 20, where we see that Abraham, in his returning from the slaughter of the kings. He defeated the confederation of kings that arose against him. These kings had taken his nephew Lot captive, and Abraham went and fought them. When he defeated them, on his way back, he was met by this mysterious priest whose name was Melchizedek, who was king over the city of Salem, which was the ancient city name of the location of Jerusalem today. So Jerusalem today was once known, before it was the Holy Land, as the city of Salem. So this guy was over what is modern day Jerusalem, and he was the priest of the Most High God. That is Melchizedek. So let's look at this together and understand. So I'm going to turn to to Genesis chapter 14 and just follow along with me. Genesis chapter 14. Here's what we find it saying. It says, "Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine." Now it's interesting to note that Jesus also brought out, remember that? He brought out bread and wine. When did he do this? He did this in the Passover. He did this in the supper. He broke the bread and he gave it to his disciples and he said, "Take and eat this bread. This is my body. It is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Then he took the wine. Now there would have been multiple cups of wine that would have been drunk during the Passover meal, but he took wine and he blessed the wine and he said, "Drink of this wine." He passed it to them. He said, "This is my blood. It is the new covenant. It is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Now that is a picture of what happens here. So now we have Melchizedek in the book of Genesis. He was the king of modern day Jerusalem, and he brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. So the word Salem is the word that means peace. So I want you to note this. So let me erase this part. The word Salem means peace. We get the idea of shalom comes out of this idea of Salem. It means he is the king of peace. And he is also called Melchizedek. Now the name Melchizedek means king of righteousness. So in using the name Melchizedek, king of Salem, what he is saying is the one that approached Abraham was the king of righteousness. The king, I forgot the nis. He was the king of righteousness, and he was the king of peace. Does that sound at all like Jesus? Jesus was the king of righteousness, and he was the king of peace. Now, notice in the title that the king of righteousness comes first. This is number 1, and this comes number 2, is the title number 2. Why would that be? This order is subtle, but it's very, very important, because until there is righteousness, there can be no peace. The path to peace only comes from true righteousness. So here's what you have. You have the king of righteousness, the king of peace, the king over Jerusalem brings out bread and wine. Well, that's the picture of Jesus in the Old Testament. Jesus is the king of righteousness. He is the king of peace, and he brought out bread and wine to his disciples, and he said, "Take this. This is my body. This is my blood. Do this in remembrance of me." So it's a picture of Jesus in the Old Testament that the writer of Hebrews is referring to. And then he says this king of righteousness, this king of peace, who brought out bread and wine, he was a priest of God Most High. In other words, he really was the first priest that is mentioned. He is the first one mentioned in the Old Testament. And he said, when he saw Abraham, whose name had not been changed, his name was Abram at the time, but when he saw this Abram or Abraham, he said, "Blessed be Abraham of God Most High. God Most High is the possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And the result of that, the response of that, is that Abraham then gave to the king of to the king of righteousness, to the king of peace, he gave him a tithe, a tithe of all. So this is a whole picture of Jesus in the Old Testament. So put these pictures together. You have the king of righteousness, the king of peace, the king over Salem, who brought out bread and wine, communion, the Passover meal. This one was the priest of God Most High. That is how Jesus becomes our high priest. The priest of God blessed Abraham the same way that Jesus blesses us. He blessed him. Blessed be Abraham, the God of Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And I want to bless God. I want to bless my Father. And this Father, my Father, has delivered your enemies into your hand. And the result of that is he gave him a tithe. He gave to him. He gave a tithe. He gave a tenth of what he had to this king of righteousness, king of peace, who brought out bread and wine. So now that's the whole picture of where Melchizedek comes from in the Old Testament. So the writer in Hebrews is saying this example in the Old Testament is who Jesus is. He is our king of righteousness. He is our king of peace. He brought out the communion, and he is the high priest of God who can go before us into the Holy of Holies to become our mediator and our compassionate high priest who carries all of our burdens on his shoulders. He blesses us. We are blessed by God, by God through Jesus, and the resulting response in our hearts is, I want to give my life to Jesus. I want to give a tithe to Jesus because he has blessed me, and I am grateful for what he has done. So do you understand this picture? So now let's flip back to the book of Hebrews, chapter 7, and read that again, Hebrews 7, starting in verse 1. So let's look at it again. Hebrews chapter 7, verses 1 through 10. So this, again, just keep that in the back of your mind that Genesis chapter 14, 18 through 20 is where we meet Melchizedek. Now, that's the only reference to him in the Bible. So here's what it says. For this Melchizedek, again, what does Melchizedek mean? It means king of righteousness, king of Salem, that's king of peace, priest of the Most High God. So he again is referencing exactly what we saw in Genesis chapter 14. He is the king of righteousness. He is the king of peace. He is the priest of the Most High God. So he's king of righteousness, king of peace. He is the high priest, and this guy, he came out and he met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings, and he blessed him. To whom also Abraham, upon being blessed in running into the king of righteousness, king of peace, the one who's king over Jerusalem, he in turn gave a tenth of all he had to this person. Now, first, this name is translated King of Righteousness. That's what the name Melchizedek means. It means King of Righteousness, and then also it means King of Peace, meaning King of Peace, or King of Salem, meaning King of Peace. Now, this is a reference to that story. It seems and it appears that this king of Melchizedek, King of Righteousness, King of Peace, was without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God. He remains a priest continually. So what is this all a reference to? Well, this is a reference to, in the Old Testament, this idea that this person had no genealogy, he had no mother or father listed. He was the king of righteousness, the king of peace, the king over Salem. He was the one to bless Abraham, and Abraham in return gave a tithe to. So in other words, he is a type of Jesus. He is a type of Christ. He's a representation of Christ in the Old Testament. Now, was that an appearing of Jesus in the Old Testament? Maybe. Was it just a type of Jesus or an example of what Jesus was going to be? Perhaps. But here's what we know, that Jesus is fulfilling the same order of Melchizedek. Jesus is King of righteousness, King of Salem. He is the king over Jerusalem. He is a high priest of God who is our mediator. He is the one who blesses the Abraham in this particular case, the way he blesses us, and in return we give a tithe to him. Now, this king of righteousness, king of Salem, Melchizedek, didn't have father or mother, neither did Jesus. Didn't have genealogy, neither did Jesus. Jesus wasn't from the tribe of Levi. He wasn't from the family of Aaron. He had no genealogy, no mother or father, but he was eternal. He was perpetual. Melchizedek would not be that if Melchizedek was just a man, but the Son of God is a priest continually forever and ever, because it's a different type of priest. It is under different lines. It is not fulfilling the normal role of priest that we see from the time of Jacob or Israel, from the time of Aaron and Moses. It's a different kind of priest. So let's keep going through this. Let's look at verses 4 through 10. Now consider how great this man was. And who is this man that he's talking about? It's Melchizedek. Consider how great this man, consider how great Melchizedek was. Consider how great. To whom even the patriarch Abraham, so look at how great Abraham was, how rich he was, how powerful he was, that this man Melchizedek was so great that even Abraham would give him a tithe, a tenth of the spoils. I love the idea of spoils. The idea of spoils is really, really interesting when you understand and you look at the word. The word spoils literally means it literally means top of the heap. Where did Abraham get spoils? Well, he got spoils from the battles that he was just in. He destroyed these people who took his nephew Lot, and then he took spoils. The spoils are the choicest winnings of the war, essentially, the choicest spoils. So you could put choicest spoils of war. The word spoils then means the top of the heap. So when Abraham tithed to Melchizedek, he did not take from the bottom, he took literally from the top of the heap. I think that's a wonderful picture, because does God in your life get the leftovers? Does he get the bottom? You know, after I've done everything else, I will give him the bottom? Or does God get everything right off the very top? He gets the top of the heap. It's a good picture of tithing. When you tithe, you give God the choicest. You give God the top. You give God the first. He gets the first fruits of whatever it is that you are tithing to him. He gets the best. And we take the rest, and God multiplies the rest so that it's more than enough for us to live on. But when you tithe, you give God from the top. He gave Melchizedek a tenth of the spoils. And so this again is a picture of Jesus. This man was greater than Abraham, and Abraham in return gave him the tenth of the choicest right off the top from our victories in the war. So he goes on to say this, and indeed, those who are sons of Levi, now that's the traditional priesthood, those who receive the priesthood because they're born into the family, have a commandment to receive tithes from the people according to the law, that is, from their brethren, though they have come from the loins of Abraham. So if Abraham is willing to give a tithe to this man Melchizedek, who Abraham would have been just great in that time, he looked at Melchizedek and said, this man is greater. Later in the line came the Levites, came the priesthood. If they are able to collect a tithe, how much even more is the value of Abraham giving to this man Melchizedek? This has to be the ultimate tithe. This is the ultimate command to give. Let's wrap this up with this thought. Here's what it says. So this is a continuation. Now, let me just again reiterate what I just said before, what we just read before. It says that indeed those who are of the sons of Levi, that means the ones who came after Levi. So Levi and the tribe of Levi, that became the priests, and then everyone derived out of that who were part of the priestly line. Now all of the other tribes, all of the other 11 tribes, all of the people that came out of that, they would just been the regular Jewish people. They're the people. They would then give tithes to the priests for the operation of the temple of God, and then they would also live, the priests would live off of the tithes that were given. So that's what he just said. Now, they came from the tribe of Levi, and this whole, all of the people according to the law would give to their brethren. But he, whose genealogy is not derived from them. So again, who's the he? This is the Melchizedek. He was outside of this. He came well before any of this. So Melchizedek came well before any of this system was set up in place. Now he, though, was blessed by Abraham. He, Melchizedek, whose genealogy is not derived from them, who's them? Well, that's down here, that's this system. He received tithes from Abraham, and he blessed him who had the promises. Now, what promises did Abraham have? Well, Abraham was promised by God that he would be the father of a multitude of nations. He would have more kids than there are sand on the sea, on the beaches, or stars in the sky. This one who had received the promise turned around and blessed the one who had come out and blessed him. So Melchizedek blessed Abraham, and Abraham in turn blessed Melchizedek by giving tithes to him. So that's what this is talking about. Now, beyond all contradiction, the lesser is blessed by the better. So who is the lesser? That's the question. Who is the lesser? Abraham is the lesser. Who then is the greater? Who is the one who is the greater? Well, that's Melchizedek. Melchizedek is the greater. He blessed Abraham, who was the lesser. Now, all of the Jewish people would have always said, well, Abraham was the greater. And that's not the way it was. Melchizedek was the greater. Abraham was the lesser. Melchizedek blessed the lesser, Abraham, and Abraham the lesser in turn gave tithes to the greater. That's the picture of our relationship with God. Jesus is the greater and he blesses us, the lesser, but we in turn turn around and give out of gratitude to the one who has blessed us. So let's wrap this up. Here, he says, mortal men receive tithes, but there he receives them, of whom it is witnessed that he lives. Even Levi, now that is down here, even Levi, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, so to speak, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. So Levi, who had not yet been born, would be born later because Abraham would have two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac would have two sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob would have sons, 12 sons. Levi would have been one of those 12. So Abraham would have been his grandfather in the process of, or great grandfather, in the process of all of this thing happening. Levi had not yet been born, but essentially Abraham was paying tithes on behalf of Levi later. So what does all of this have to do? Why is the writer of Hebrews talking about all of this? Well, all he is doing is laying out how Jesus is the ultimate high priest, how Jesus is the king of righteousness, how Jesus is the king of peace, how Jesus is the king over Jerusalem, how Jesus would come out with bread and wine on behalf of the people to give to the people, how Jesus became the ultimate picture of sacrifice in the bread and in the wine, how Jesus would bless the lesser people around him. Jesus is the perfect one, but he will bless the lesser. We don't deserve to be blessed by Jesus, but he blesses us anyway. And we in turn return with gratitude toward Jesus by giving tithes or giving our hearts to him or making him number one. We don't give him just the leftovers of life. We give him the spoils of life. We give him off of the heap. We give him the top of who we are. Not only financially, but we give him the top of every part of our life. Everything about our life is committed to him. In essence, our life becomes one major tithe toward God when we say, God, here I am, take me. All that I have is yours. So this idea that the writer of Hebrews has been presenting through multiple chapters, he is finally coming to a conclusion, saying that Jesus is along the lines of Melchizedek. He's not a priest out of the Levi tribe. He is not out of the family of Aaron, which was a part of the Levi tribe. He is a priest beyond all of that. He is the ultimate high priest. And as the ultimate high priest, he blesses us, he carries our burdens, and he can make mediation and intercession on our behalf. Well, I hope that that was understandable to you. I hope that it somewhat made sense, and we will going to keep diving into that more as we dive into our next devotional. Next time, we'll pick it up in chapter 7, verse 11, where we talk about the need for a new priesthood according to the writer of Hebrews. Till then, have a great day. I'll see you next time. God bless you.